when you feel triggered and you feel like something's up, my nervous system is up, somebody walks in and you're just like, you know, then a very simple thing is to just check in on yourself physically. What am I just feeling physically? I feel like there's something, my heart is pumping, you know, things like that, things that are physical. You know, I feel like my hands are starting to sweat. So that's already bringing me back to my story, my reality, rather than my story of, oh, that mother, you know, they just came in here because I told them not to come in here. They always do this. So rather than proliferating this story that runs away with itself, and it encourages me to be in my head even more, you know, I'm actually coming back to my body. That's like a step one. What's going on physically? You know, like you can build from there.
So the other day I was walking through town and I was thinking, why have I got this nervousness? And I linked it back to, I used to do this trip, and yet all these people that I didn't like, who didn't like me, people that used to pick on me, used to bully me, throw stuff at me, how I would fear walking past the bank because that's where they hang out. And I was thinking, this is subconscious. It's in my brain. I'm conscious. It's not unconscious because I'm awake, but it's in my brain. It's like the fault narrative of when a leaf moves, it could be a lion about to pounce. So now every time a leaf moves, by default, I get ready to run. And I looked around and I saw there's no lion, there's no leaves. And so I remembered thinking, wow, this subconscious fear that I had from back in the day is still here because I haven't had this situation where I've become aware of it and changed it. So as I've gone through my healing journey in life, I've realized that there's only one way that you can really get to the end goal of letting out that energy that was stored in you from a traumatic time. And that is sitting with that pain and letting that feeling come to the surface and trying to find a positive outcome or a lesson that will better serve you for the rest of your life. So rather than sitting in the victim feeling of, why did this happen? I wanted this to happen and it didn't happen, poor me. Try and find something that is a positive out of a piece of shit. You've got to find something positive, like a worm can now eat, and you've contributed for a worm's existence on this planet. And then through finding all these positive meanings in what is was a negative situation, it will help you go from pain to gratitude to love. And now you don't see that situation as painful and angry like you once did. You now see it as gratitude and love, because that situation taught me this. For the rest of my life, I've now got this lesson because of this one human being that came into my life. And now, in the grand scheme of things, that person plays a massive positive effect in your whole life versus a negative effect.
Yeah, can't disagree there.
Okay, now you can just talk from there.
Yeah. Sounds like are you speaking out of a specific, like, is there something specific that comes to you when you know, it sounds like you're in the stream of consciousness.
Yeah, so I was my friend voice noted me talking about a situation with an ex and how it was very traumatic. He cheated on her and he's recently come back into her life, brought up all these emotions and pain that you sort of put to bed. And it's like, why are you doing this? And he's like, because I want to just send love to you and you're still part of my tribe. And, you know, even though we didn't work out, there's lots of love. Whereas she sees it as, you cheated on me. I traveled across the world to see you, to find that you cheated on me. I see this as pain. You see this as just love and part of your journey. And so she was saying to me, what advice can you give me? And I was like, well, from my experience, every time something has happened that has been painful, I've learned to just become numb to it, but I'm not avoiding sitting with the pain. So you become numb to it, but then you process it. And you try and find, why did this happen? What have I learned from it? Why will this happen again? If it does happen again, how can I stop it? What do I now have to do to stop that from happening again? So I'm in pain, but I'm sitting with it. I know it's going to happen again. If it's a pattern that you know is likely going to occur, become numb to it, but don't avoid dealing with it. And that's what I said to her. Which goes back to, you know, if people have near-death experiences, they're more likely going to appreciate the small things in life and not worry about all the stupid little shitty things that we think about. It's the same for trauma. You can become so numb to trauma and abuse that as long as you deal with it, you realize that that's just what life is. There's shit, there's trauma, there's abuse, boss is a twat, your parents are going to not understand you. That's life. So you've become victim, poor me your whole life, or you get on with it and try and find positives for every damn thing that happens in your life to make life meaningful.
Yeah. So you're taking, rather than I'm being done to, I'm also a part of creating this reality.
Yeah, it's almost like the phrase of it isn't happening to you, it's happening for you.
Yeah, I like that. I know that it's easy to say that when you feel okay as well, and it can be quite triggering when you're in the thing and feeling like, oh, you know, what does that even mean, or how do I? It's like a tease, isn't it? But yeah, and I think especially when it comes to, as this came from a couple, like a romantic couple, it's so even though we can have such great trajectories in our life, you know, thinking about like reforming the governance and the politics, the economy, and all the rest. But then when it comes to it, interpersonal relationships is what the society is built on. So when it comes to it, our hormones and the stage that we are in life, you know, always is a major factor in our experience of life. At least that's what I can say for me. So I would agree with you. Also, like, there's something in like, okay, how do I access that? You know, if I said that to myself when I was 17, you know, it's all very fine and well, but you know, I might not have had the means to kind of access that, because at 17 my nervous system was still so wrapped up in a very unsafe environment, you know, and was just asleep, kind of choosing other people that were resonating at that same level of what they call trauma bonding these days. But you know, like, it depends on, I suppose, where we're at and what we want. The clearer we can be, and like, well, what am I doing with my life? What am I doing with my time here? And what are the patterns that I keep manifesting? Like for this man and woman that you described, I wonder, you know, were they asked, has this happened to you before? I'm just wondering, you know, like, have you had is there another relationship that this reminds you of? You know, obviously not the same exact details, but is there something in the energy that feels similar? Like, it could be like, yeah, I don't feel seen. I don't feel acknowledged. I don't feel, you know, for her. And maybe for him, it's like, yeah, I don't feel seen in like the effort I'm making. And like I'm just branded with this, like, oh, I'm a horrible monster, as if I'm trying to hurt them, when I'm just saying plainly that I love them and that's why I'm doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So like everything I think is to do with like balance of energy and karma. So the yin and yang. So for example, if you believe in past lives, if you left your past life having something that was really good, right? Money, power, status, gold, whatever, but you did a shitty thing, right? You will now come back, not have the good things that you had. It's like they'll be taken away, and you will be sat with the shitty things that you did until you choose to repeat that pattern and be shittier to the people that are giving it back to you, because you are now in that energy of that. So it's all around you and your environment just mimics you. Or you go, actually, even though I'm in this echo chamber of bullshit, I don't want to be in this anymore, and I'm going to escape it, which balances out your karma from your past life. And then when it's perfectly balanced, then you get back, say, the power, the money, and the gold, and the status you had in the past life. So essentially, the energy that we are in this earth is made up of past energy. And it doesn't necessarily mean past lives. It could be parents' energy that they didn't balance out in their life or lives if they're still living it. And it's like when the energy is balanced, then you become whole. And so I think that all these situations that happen in a life, we don't want them to happen, and they're painful in the moment, but in the grand scheme of things, which is what I was telling her, it's all about balancing you out. Now it's like, well, how can you find a positive in your house like burning down? Of course you probably can't, but in the grand scheme of things, you get insurance payout and then you move to your dream destination in a bigger house with land and animals and whatever. So then you go, oh, everything happens for a reason. My house is meant to burn down, because if it hadn't, I wouldn't have moved over here. So, but you're right, how do you sit in that situation where you're literally in shit and go, oh, I'm going to enjoy this shit because I know that something great is going to happen, and you're looking down and the shit between your toes and you're like, oh, smells fantastic because it is beautiful. But reality is that is how life works. But it's very hard to be in those situations where, like, say your boss fires you and you go, okay, well, I appreciate your time. Shall I leave now, tomorrow? They're like, what? You're not even going to fight for your job? That's what you're supposed to do. Have no resistance. But it takes experience and trial and error in life to know that when you look back at everything you thought was a negative, something positive always comes from that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So true. And I bet, our fractal nature, looking back at those same incidents, like when we're 20 and then 30, 35, 40, 45, it's like layers of an onion. There'll be more and more and more. And, and I do feel like, talking off the cuff, there's not only physical tools that we learn about, or people we come into contact with, like on the physical plane, that are maybe the same energetic imprint as us. So like I begin to feel, for example, other people that might have an abandonment or a rejection imprint, and I feel that it's very, very subtle, because I've worked through any element of that I'm not like cured and solved or whatever. I'm still alive. So obviously that, there's still stuff at play there. But it's just really interesting. It's like life provides all these, like, who needs a cinema, just watching other people and seeing like, wow, that was me, 10 years ago. That was me suffering. That was me fucking twisting around and just not getting relief no matter what I did. It didn't matter if I read something, heard something, nothing would matter, because, well, now where I am, for example, I've studied a lot of this, stuff. So I understand about the nervous system and how my nervous system was so tightly bound up with my story and my upbringing. And yeah, in the 3D world, those things happened, police came to the door, blah, blah, blah. But now I can see, wow, even though I was doing all the nice holistic healing therapies, went through that for years and tried to change my thing and chose affirmations and gratitude instead of, secret victimhood and all that. Still, it was helpful for me to learn, hey, I've got a nervous system, and I didn't know how to kind of penetrate the idea of a nervous system. And the tools that I have learned anyway, as most things I feel that ring true for me, are quite simple and accessible to anybody. I follow this teacher, Rudolf Steiner, and his stuff. Like, I was a Steiner teacher for years, but the teacher training doesn't include his spirituality and stuff like that. It's like, no, this is just to do with childhood education. So they don't try to infuse everything in everything. But after I was teaching for a few years, I thought, well, it seems really good. It's all nature-based, outdoors, education for kids. That seems really good to me. Let me find out more what this guy's about. And when I read up Rudolf Steiner's spirituality, it was like, wow, it's all based on nature. I thought, he was this big German scientist and it was all going to be fancy and you have to meditate. And there are those ones as well, when you go back over your day backwards every night, and that helps you to begin to unravel your day and to work out the karma. It's like loosening it out. So if you don't go to sleep, you have all this still going on. Our story that runs through us when we're awake, these beta brainwaves, is different. When we actually put ourselves to bed, to sleep, then we're allowing these other brainwaves, theta or alpha, to lift this out. And you can use any language you want. There's loads of different spiritual languages going into the dream time that actually help us digest basically the micro traumas that we all experience. If we're sensitive, feeling, heart-centered people, which presumably maybe most of us want to be, And so, yeah, so like that, the tools that I've learned are, not that you asked, but if you'd like to hear, I'll share one or two.
Of course.
Okay, like, so for instance, when you feel triggered and you feel like something's up, my nervous system is up, somebody walks in and you're just like, then a very simple thing is to just check in on yourself physically. What am I just feeling physically? So hypothetically, my heart is beating. I feel like there's a fire in my head. I feel like there's something, my heart is pumping, things like that, things that are physical. I feel like my hands are starting to sweat. So that's already bringing me back to my story, my reality, rather than my story of, oh, that mother, they did came in here because I told them not to come in here, and they always do this. So rather than proliferating this story that runs away with itself, and it encourages me to be in my head even more, I'm actually coming back to my body. That's like a step one. What's going on physically? Like you can build from there. And like I said, one or two things, the next step from that could be like, and do I feel any impulses? Yeah, I feel like punching a wall or something. Oh no, I feel like running. I feel like slamming the door in somebody's face. So those are impulses on top of my physical sensations, just as they are, not trying to dress them up. And once you start doing that, and then there's other steps that you can just bring it from the body to the emotion to the higher thinking, because when we are triggered, when our adrenaline is flowing, well, the science says that our brain switches from the prefrontal cortex to this reptilian, the old brain, which is what we needed to like fight or flight to get out of more physical dangers in the past. This is what the brain science tells us these days. And so that goes, the prefrontal cortex goes offline when we feel like there's danger, like I'm going to miss a flight, or somebody's coming who I really triggers me. And these things, coming back to like, what does my physical body feel like? Oh, I feel a bit cold on my left side, whatever. And what does it feel like physically? And what do I feel like beyond the physical? So, emotionally, oh, I feel like just taking off my clothes and sitting in the garden. So that's an expression of freedom. So basically I feel hemmed in. I feel trapped, and then we can go deeper into that. Why do I feel trapped? Because I feel like I'm giving myself a bit of performance anxiety. I'm feeling like I'm not good enough to occupy this space. You know what I mean? So just throwing out random examples of like, wow, the places that we go with ourselves, we can experience trauma on the physical level, and then for a decade after, we can experience trauma that is amplified internally, right? I think we all know this if we've sat with ourselves for any amount of time.
So a recent event is where I was walking around my local town, and because I grew up around here, that's the same town that I used to walk through in the school days, in the days of being bullied, being scared of other people from other schools that were trying to fight me. And so the other day I was walking through town and I was thinking, why have I got this nervousness? And I linked it back to, I used to do this trip, and yet all these people that I didn't like, who didn't like me, people that used to pick on me, used to bully me, throw stuff at me, how I would fear walking past the bank because that's where they hang out. And I was thinking, this is subconscious. It's in my brain. I'm conscious. It's not unconscious because I'm awake, but it's in my brain. This like the fault narrative of when a leaf moves, it could be a lion about to pounce. So now every time a leaf moves, by default, I get ready to run. And I looked around and I saw there's no lion, there's no leaves. And so I remembered thinking, wow, this subconscious fear that I had from back in the day is still here because I haven't had this situation where I've become aware of it and changed it and told myself those days are over. That fear mechanism you had where you used to go the other way in town versus the bank way because the bullies were there is no longer here. And so from that very moment, there's no fear, there's no anxiousness, there's no heartbeat increase, there's no feeling sick. It's like, why am I feeling sick? What is the reason? I haven't eaten anything bad, so therefore it has to be thoughts. What's in my thoughts? Well, I'm not thinking about anything, I'm meditating. Okay, what's in your subconscious thoughts? What's in your environment? What happened in your past life where this environment may have made you feel uncomfortable? And it goes back to walking the same path that I used to do during school and college, going into the same cafes and the same sandwich shops with all the people I hated, and I hated school, I hated college. And it's just becoming aware of those patterns of why is it triggering this reaction, and then sitting with yourself to really go inwards and be like, what could it have been? And you have to go back essentially your whole life, because it could have been a situation that happened when I was 7 years old, when my dad took me into town and I got stopped by security because they thought I stole some sweets, right? And since then I've got like this thing in the town where I'm on like alert for somebody, like security, trying to get me, and there's security all in town, so I'm unconsciously preparing for like someone's going to get me, but there's no threat. That security guard is a new person, not even the same person. The town center's even been done up, it's completely refurbished, doesn't even look the same. So again, finding that root cause of this trigger can only come from sitting down, going within. It could take ages, it could take weeks, it could take months. The same as this person who split with her boyfriend, happened like last year, and it's still in her, it's still punishing her, it's on her mind, her nervous system increases, she gets anxious, she feels sick for something that happened a year ago. And it's like, well, what is the answer? And depending on your energy, depends on the amount of pain I think the energy has to go through to untangle everything. And once you are untangled, you ascend and you evolve. But depending on how meaningful the lesson is, once you get to the end, determines how much pain you sit in, I think. It's almost like you have to really learn your lesson in order to really not get back in this pattern again. If you kept going into these patterns, it's like, how many times you got to get punched in the face before you don't call someone a rude name? You know, maybe you got to lose a tooth, and then you won't call anybody a rude name ever again.
Yeah. Yeah. And true. And also, you know, hearing the words of like, you know, you've got to sit over that and think over it. And I don't know, I feel like, yes. And also, I think with time, it's not just like, you know, my new, I don't know, my new thing. I'm really into, I don't know, cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, or I'm really into somatic experiencing. There's in the therapy world, you know, things rise and things fall. Hypnotherapy, Reiki, angel cards, all these types of healing modalities come up and they fall again. Right now, there's a lot on somatic experiencing, SE, and also this eye movement.
Rapid eye movement.
Yeah. So when I, you know, am on that path of healing, you know, there's the external source, like, so all these external modalities, you know, some of which I might feel passionate enough to, you know, practice and train. A lot of the people that are in this, it's kind of like you teach the things that you most need to learn yourself, right?
Yes.
And it's not a hard rule, but often the ones that make the therapists or professionals that make a meaningful kind of mark are the ones that have lived through it themselves, so they know. And they don't have to wear their heart on their sleeve because their frequency is enough, and the way that they approach receiving, like, you know, clients, because it takes a certain sensitivity. Say for somebody who's grown up with domestic abuse compared to sexual abuse compared to violence in the school, there's like slightly different frequencies. So like what you said earlier about, you know, going back to your hometown, you know, that really touches me. I would imagine most people, you know, when we think about going back to our hometown, it can bring up a lot, you know, and that sense of hypervigilance, which a lot of us have had to grow up with because maybe our childhoods weren't, you know, as harmonious as it could have been. So we grew up with a hypervigilance, you know, whether it was the school violence or there was a nasty teacher or, you know, parents or whatever, siblings. And this hypervigilance, it creates our own frequency, right? So that other, you know, people, and this is interesting for those of us who have had a few different lives in the past, you know, doing lots of different things, you know, it's really interesting. And what we notice on a micro level or micro energetic level, of course, nobody else knows, you know, everybody's in their own world. It's all very narcissistic these days. And so it is. There's no wrong or right. It's our individuation, where we are in the West, where in the past it was much more collective and tribe centered. And so now we've kind of like fought our way to like having individual rights, being autonomous and sovereign, or so we think. And what does true sovereignty really mean? When you drop into like a retreat or a festival, like a 7-day event, especially if those ones that are like, sober events that, no alcohol or, anything, then people, if it's a good event, and I think most of them are, then people, they start to live through their hearts. They start to feel connected. They start to feel safe. I start to feel like, I don't need to have all these layers of armoring. And I can start to, yeah, my nervous system can relax. And then they talk about, okay, now the festival's over. You're going to go back into real life. Be careful. Keep drinking water. Keep your feet on the ground. Mind your driving. It's because, yeah, we've had an altered state of consciousness while being in this environment, like a little micro environment. And I think, like you said, as we started, you're taking those experiences in life that somebody from the outside could see as a weakening portal, like, oh, that was, got all soft for a week and now you have to, get yourself strong again or whatever. Or I was down in this relationship or in finding out this kind of news about my partner, and that, I can feel my immunity drop. I feel a bit like, oh, I can't trust anybody now. So the hypervigilance might come up, the adrenaline comes online, all these things, the heart starts beating because I don't know where I stand. The goalpost has been moved, right? And like to take those experiences and say, okay, yes, and rather than saying, but, it's like, it's a delicate dance sometimes, I feel, between looking at those things and, like you said, sitting with it, making friends with those kind of skeletons in the closet and shadow sides, which probably aren't isolated to me, myself, and I. There may be an ancestral theme going on there, like rejection, abandonment, or this arrogance, this entitlement. A lot of this stuff is playing out now, and as it's most people know, our whole lineage, our ancestors, it all ends with us now and our kids. It's like, it's what I do with it now. Am I going to do the same old thing again? Am I going to react the way my forefathers did and feel like I need to react and show that I'm not going to be pushed down? And there's a way to do that empowers me and builds me up rather than depletes me and lets me leak my energy.
Yeah. So my dad's mum, when he was in Singapore, she died really young, and all the siblings then just sort of had no family. So they had no stability. They were being shipped around to the locals in the village. You look after them, you look after them. Eventually my dad was adopted, and there's a common theme with all of them, which is they all have Tourette's. I have Tourette's. So they don't twitch as much as I did. I was officially diagnosed at 12, but they just have all the sniffing and the twitching and the blinking. And so I healed my Tourette's at 21 through meditation, going through all my trauma, going through childhood, undoing everything, right? I look back, they still twitch. I don't twitch as much. I twitch when I'm thinking, but I don't really twitch day to day, whereas they do. So I realized that the reason why I had Tourette's massively is because essentially I took on all their unresolved trauma from their mother. Their mother died, you get on with it. That's it. I undid everything. I got into the deep emotion of how it would have felt as if it was me and what I would have done, and being adopted and leaving your siblings in Singapore and how that really affects you, and like being the brown kid at school and everyone else is white. And like I went through all my dad's pain, which essentially he never dealt with, which I had then got given. I had to flip it and reverse it. So going through all of the trauma from past is a result of all the shit that I attracted into my life. So I didn't mean to attract all the stuff that happened in my life. It came to me, but it came to me because of the energy that my ancestors were, my uncles, my aunties, my dad, her parents, the trauma that my dad's mum went through for being adopted as well, China, like just how everything was out there, and it's all come down. And I chose to be the person that breaks the pattern. And so what the point is that you were saying how you look at other people around you and they become the old version of you. Like I see my uncle and my uncles and my aunties as the old version of me, the me that I would have been, my dad, which was the old version of me that I would have become and still could be if I hadn't have done the work. So now I look around and I see, holy shit, that was me. And you kind of see the journey that they're on, because essentially you would have done that same journey, or you wish that they get to the same end goal that you've got to. But now you don't see these things as pain, you see them as blessings. Because now it's, if I hadn't have become aware of that trauma, I'd still be in it. And because I was aware, I've now removed it. So now my life is far better than yours and what mine would have been, because you're living with the trauma. I'm not. So now I'm grateful that I'm seeing you live with that. And again, suddenly that becomes a blessing, because if I hadn't become aware of it, I'd be sitting in shit too. So again, how you see the same thing can go from being poor me, victim, negative, stupid ancestors didn't resolve their karma, to fuck, I'm so grateful that my dad had a sniff, and I had to work out why his sister had a sniff and his brother had a sniff, and understand about trauma and how it sits in the body with tension and like twitching. Body's dying to release this tension. What it must have been like to lose a mother as a kid. And then you realize, oh, fucking hell, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. And everything that I attracted in this life was a reflection of that unbalanced energy. So everything is like life lessons to involvement, to enlightenment. And nothing can be victimized, because it gets you to enlightenment if you do the work.
Yeah. And part of that, part of the fruits for me anyway of that work means that, you know, like what you're describing there is, one could label it, if they were looking to grasp and put it in a category and say, oh, you're talking about detachment. Oh yeah, that's always helpful if you're not too attached to the outcome. And that's true. That's one way of categorizing it. And part of detachment means, you know, as I'm on this path, and maybe even especially for those of us that are on this path of feeling like, I am interested in being conscious. I am interested in the patterns that just seem to be magnetized to me no matter what I do. I'm interested to know what is the mechanism at play there? What is it that I'm missing? What's my blind spot? And often it's like, what is going on inside as I am interested? And often there's a little, or that's a relative size, but there's a little judge or a critic there, you know, like, oh, I see that. Oh, I see that narcissism. I'm going to heal that. Oh, I see that judgment. I'm going to heal that, you know, so there's like the judge of the judge of the judge, you know. And Rudolf Steiner is great because for all his lofty, and he was fucking prolific, agriculture, you know, childhood education, religion, economy, community governance, all this stuff, the arts he was prolific in. And two of the major things was always reminding us that we have free will. The thing is, most of us don't activate our higher will. A lot of us are familiar with this lower will, which is the impulse to do things, you know, the kind of, what do they call that? Impulsiveness. There's a phrase for it. When you can restrain your desires and when you just can't. And of course, our internet culture at the moment is really encouraging. It's really kind of filtering through the whole dopamine religion, you know, and all of us, I think, to piggyback on what you're saying about everything that you could be brandishing it as bad, there's also so much good in it. I mean, that comes directly out of, you know, Christ's teachings of like finding the beauty and the love in the evil, in the shadows and stuff. And don't lose the thread now. And yeah, so his two tenets was, we have free will. And to activate that higher will, you know, we often get into this lower will thing. To activate that higher will, that golden opportunity often comes when we are cut down, when we have some illness, when we're really, 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 really suffering. Because hey, anybody can be the big man when we're feeling big, right? It's when we're low, when shit is what we breathe, that is when the higher will has a chance to birth again. And the other thing is, and this is an important one for people that are on a spiritual path, is to look at your fellow man as another, being of love. It can be tempting, and sometimes we fall into this without being conscious of it, but we can begin to look at things quite materialistically, thinking like, oh, another great spiritual lesson for me. Oh, another opportunity to find the good and the bad. You know what I mean? We can just, it's kind of subtle, but we can kind of just be a bit reductionist and categorize. And it's very close to looking at people as things. And so we just have to be careful to, yeah, like you say, to remember to keep and cherish that connection with gratitude, like sincere gratitude from the heart, and humility, and that sense of awe. This is one of the main things that Steiner said. Like, he's talking about childhood education and raising our kids that become us, and how, whatever, back in his day, he said, you know what, children are taught how to be cynical rather than be in awe. And it's such a sad statement, if you know, little human beings. And like, I was a school teacher, for years, so that really touched me. And I thought, yeah, it's kind of true. And parents, they talk about like, oh, my little girl or boy they've redeemed my life and they're the best thing. And, again, it's like, be careful. We can start to live a narcissistic life, kind of like putting this child on a pedestal and not checking in with like, where is my intentions coming from? It's got to be a balance, it's yin and yang. So it's not all like love and light. It's like, okay, how am I serving this relationship to really evolve and to continuously cultivate the awe in life of letting questions be unanswered sometimes, because I honestly don't know. And I'm open to the wonder of life and the miracles that take place. Anyway, I hope that makes sense.
It does. Right. Let's end that there. Is there anything that you wish to promote or plug before we finish?
Promote or plug? Well, I'm releasing my debut single. So it's been a long birth. So aside from being a backer on my crowdfunding campaign on GoFundMe, there's lots of ways to help, like YouTube video updates. Leaving a comment actually is a great help. Probably the most important thing is pre-saving my single, which I'll have to give you a link when I have it. I'm stuck in this matrix, trying not to be a victim, but feeling like I just made the music, have to jump through all the hoops of whatever the music distribution business requires of me. So there's this thing called pre-saving these days, where people say, yes, I'm interested in buying the debut single from Penelope. It's like €1. So it's for most people, it's not that demanding. And if we have no money, which I know this place as well, then leaving a comment on YouTube on those videos that have, low views is very helpful for me as well.
Okay. And if you had one day left to live, what's the one thing that you would tell the rest of the world?
If I one day what?
If you had one day left to live, what is the one thing that you would tell the rest of the world?
Oh, this old one. It's never easy, is it? One thing to tell the world.
The most profound thing that you could say.
Oh, no pressure, right? Well, I feel like I love to say I'm not a profound person. It seems like my healing is turning into a stand-up comedian act. So I love that. I love that. Yeah. There's when it comes to
5 minutes.
well, I mean, okay. I heard that. Come as you are, and come exactly as you are. You are perfect. And it's a shame you can't see it, but trust me, because I can feel you. Come exactly as you are. That's how we were born, and that's how we're going to go. So why not embrace it and really get deep in there and own it?
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please remember to subscribe, turn the bell notifications on, like the episode, and comment below. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's YesKingOliver. Take a look at the other videos to your side. And if you just want to listen to this podcast, you can do so on Apple and Spotify and most other platforms by going to talkwitholiver.com.